A very good morning to you. Welcome to the thinking place, to the thought for the day place. I hope you're well this morning. We are looking at the second half of chapter 1 of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, centering really on this lovely first verse, verse 18 here. For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. And he goes on to talk about the wise and the foolish, wisdom. And he says this very interesting thing in verse 22. Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom. These were the two contrasting cultures of Paul's day, really. The Jews, we see when we read the Gospels, how often people came to Jesus wanting proof, wanting a sign, wanting some supernatural intervention that would endorse what Jesus did. And yet, when they did have them happen, they wouldn't accept them. This was the Jewish way, the Jewish culture. They lived in their lives with the history of the Jews, and the greatest thing God had ever done for them was bringing them out of Egypt. And before they were brought out of Egypt, there were signs. There was the water turned to blood. There was the plague of flies, the plague of gnats, the plague of locusts. There was the darkness, all these signs. And yet Pharaoh did not believe. But there were signs all the way through, miraculous things that God did. And this was in their thinking that if God was really working through someone, there would be signs to endorse and confirm what was being taught. And yet we see perhaps in John 9, when the blind man was healed by Jesus, because it happened on the Sabbath, they were convinced, the Jewish leaders, that Jesus couldn't be a good man. He couldn't come from God if he disobeyed the Sabbath rulings. And they interrogated this poor man who had been blind and now could see, because they would not accept. If they accepted his sign came from God, then they had to accept that some of their rules and regulations were misguided or wrong, and that they would have to change their thinking and their behaviour, and they weren't prepared to do that. So even when the signs came, how often they said to Jesus, show us a sign. Do you remember he said, I'll not show you a sign. The only sign you're going to get is that of Jonah. And of course Jonah spent time in the belly of a great fish and then came back to his life afterwards. And it was, I think, the imagery was about the time Jesus was going to spend in the tomb. And even when that happened, even when they knew something supernatural had happened, they told the guards to say the disciples had stolen the body, so that no one would believe he'd come back to life. They wouldn't accept the ultimate sign. The Jews seek for signs, but the Greeks seek wisdom. Now the Greek civilization, wasn't it an amazing civilization? There are great philosophers, great thinkers, great mathematicians, great scientists, all those great names. The theory, the right angle triangle theory by Pythagoras. The cry of Eureka, I've found it. Sophocles and the great writers of literature, they were a thinking people. They were not a doing people, they were a thinking people. This was so amazing about the ancient world. The Greeks were the thinkers, the Romans were the doers. And when the Romans came to power and took over the Greek Empire, they incorporated the Greek thinking into their doing. And they had the best of both worlds. They had all the thinking and all the understanding of how the world worked and all the incredible advances that had been made due to all these Greek thinkers, but they were the ones who had the impetus to do, and they marched all over the world taking it. But the Greeks seek wisdom, And here we are writing a letter to Corinth, the second greatest city in Greece. And Paul is contrasting the two, the Jews seeking for signs, the Greeks seeking wisdom. And what does God give? God gives the cross, which to both of them is foolish. It's foolishness. Didn't make sense to anybody. And this idea that the cross, the word of the cross, is folly to those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Elsewhere, Paul says that it is not possible for someone before they are born again to grasp what the cross is all about. It is a mystery to people. It is foolishness. When you think about it logically, it is foolishness. What other religion venerates a symbol of execution? What other religion does that? Is there a religion that hangs round its neck a guillotine, or a hangman's noose, or an executioner's sword? Is there another religion that venerates a symbol of execution? No, there isn't. Why do we do that? Because it is the most powerful symbol in the world. The empty cross. It speaks of the whole of Easter, the whole of the life of Jesus, all that he achieved, that he died on that cross and that he rose from the dead, and he is not on that cross anymore. He has defeated death and hell. He's done it by using the most cruel form of execution. He's done it. He's even redeemed that. It's folly. To the Greeks, it doesn't make any kind of sense. And I think perhaps this is why John, the dear disciple John, wrote his gospel, because he'd been thinking along Greek lines, and he thought about the word, and he thought it was philosophical. He thought about the word becoming flesh, and he used language that the Greeks could embrace and would enjoy. It's very Gentile, John's gospel, in a lot of its thinking, because it presents thinking, and the Greeks were the great thinkers. But the other thing I think about the foolishness of God, God's ways and God's understanding and God's methods often do seem foolish to us. They often seem to us a daft way to go about things. Why would you do it that way? Why wouldn't you do it a different way? But the foolishness of God brings us salvation. And the cross may be folly, but it is so simple and straightforward to understand that even children can come to faith at a very young age and understand that Jesus died for them. So there's some thoughts. My goodness, haven't we covered a lot this morning? Praise God for the cross and the empty cross at that. I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye. God bless.